So, Jim, do you have anything? Or?
Not till we get into the beers.
All right.
Our beer.
Well, something we can talk about, and feel free to edit this however it makes sense, but I'm calling 2019 the year of the collab.
Okay.
So I'm already like almost 15 in. Proximity is sponsoring it. We're getting a poster put together. It's a whole thing. So, I mean, if you wanted to segue, like
I'll do it.
I heard you're doing 2019 is the year of the collab for 1840 or whatever. That would be...
Yeah, absolutely. Shit writes itself. And Kyle writes it for you.
Yeah.
Cheers.
You've stumbled on into the Tap Takeover Podcast. All right, welcome back to the Tap Takeover Podcast. And we've got a very special collaboration episode today. Before we get to our guest star here, our star of the show, as it were, we'd like to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing. We haven't had an episode out in a little bit because we've been extremely busy. We've covered 2 beer events, both the Joint Beer Fest as well as the Smells Like a Beer Fest down in Chicago. Look for those episodes to come out in the coming weeks, and we hope you enjoy spending some time with us down at those festivals. They were amazing. And one of those folks who was at both of those festivals is sitting right next to me today. So welcome to the podcast, owner of 1840.
Thank you for having me.
So Kyle Vetter has been on the program before. We've done some extensive deep dives into his brewing process.
Does that mean drinking, right?
Extensive mostly just drinking.
Research.
R&D, we like to call it. But yeah, we've gotten into your brewing process before, and it's really fun to talk about this collaboration that we did, which we will get into a little bit later.
Sure.
But we want to talk to you about some things beforehand. But we kind of challenged you to do something way out of your norm, out of your comfort zone on this one.
And we did. All the things were different about it from the beginning to the end. This is a beer that challenged us and led us down different processes that we've never done. We've always talked about doing, and then we just did them all at once.
All right, so we are going to talk about that one in just a little bit, but we wanted to take a step back and talk about some other collaborations that you've been doing. We were down here, some of us were down here for the pre-Joint Fest, which is where you showcased the Joint IPA 2.0. So you had it out last year, in collaboration with Eagle Park, but that was a little bit different. You guys kind of took the recipe and did your own thing. Yeah,
we wrote the recipe together for the base beer, and then we brewed them, brewed the wort for both of them at Eagle Park, but we didn't tell each other what we were going to do with hops or yeast. And the goal was just to make it juicy and dank. And so we both tried to do our best interpretation of juicy and dank. And that was fun because neither one of us had tried either beer until the day of the event. Whereas this year, it was different. We decided to combine our favorite parts from both beers and make one ultimately juicy and dank product.
And you said that you had learned a lot of processes just over the last year. I mean, between all the different collaborations that you've done, all the education that you've been able to accrue. So tell us, what was different about 2.0 versus 1.0?
I think how we hopped it, in terms of we did a lot more cooler late edition hops in the Whirlpool. We cooled it down a little bit more than we had the previous year. We added different proportions of certain malts that we've been playing around with. Here at 1840, we use a lot of dextrin malt to build up the body. We're also pushing the proportions of wheat and oats up. We really just want to make it kind of creamy without having any lactose in it. So that's something that we've been doing that we were kind of pushing for when we sat down with the Eagle Park guys to talk about the collab, was doing some of those things. And then we hopped at rates which are higher. So both of us in the last year have started using hops a lot more heavily, and so that was something we wanted to lean on and incorporate into the beer for sure, because how we were brewing when we first wrote the recipe for that beer to how we're both brewing now, it's a lot more extreme, if you will. We're packing a lot more into our IPAs, so it was fun to do that and bring it together and try to summarize a year of brewing, if you will.
So that was, the pre-Joint Fest was on 4/19, the Joint Fest was on 4/20, and Eagle Park kind of went about it a little differently. They did collaborations with a number of different breweries, including yours.
Yeah.
And did you get to try any of those other collaborations? Any favorites?
I did. I really liked, I tried them all. I showed up late, but I did get to try them all. I really liked the Bahama Mama. That was really good. It was really cool. The pineapple and the coconut and all the things really came together well on that one. And then I think it was Drecker's beer was the fruit one. It was purple.
Oh, was that the blueberry pie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think those were my two favorites. But it's cool. I mean, what was neat about it is they all stuck to a theme, except for ours, which was just an IPA. Everything was supposed to be like a Munchies theme.
Well, yours was like the OG.
Right, yeah. So we had to stick with that. But that was cool. They stuck with the theme. They nailed a diverse array of styles and really gave people who left the event a neat six-pack to take home to remember that by.
So also, you've done another collaboration with Mikerphone in recent months here, which is kind of their turn up here with you guys,
right?
Which is super interesting. You did a peanut butter and jelly sour called We Go Together. Tell us a little bit about that beer. I mean, how did you get that bready quality on the back end? Because it seems like everybody nowadays is kind of expanding and trying to do that what you did with that beer in the coming months now.
It's definitely easy to do jelly, and
sure.
Anybody could add a little peanut butter, but you guys really did have like a Wonder Bread thing going on at the back end.
Right, yeah, it was. It's like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich on sourdough with the crust cut off. Is like what some people have gone as far to say, and you can't argue with that description. It really is pretty accurate, which was fun. But I don't know. I think it's the souring process. It's the grains we used. It's wheat heavy. So I think the wheat, when you sour it, kind of comes out a little bit more bready tasting, just naturally. And we decided, I was like, all right, I was down at the Mikerphone for the Contraband release. And I'm like, all right, let's come up by us and we'll do something weird. How about a pastry sour? And Mike's like, hell yeah, let's get weird. That sounds crazy, like off the wall. So we batted some ideas around. And interestingly enough, we were going to do a lemon meringue pastry sour.
Oh, okay.
But then, I don't know, a couple of days, a week-ish before we went to brew the beer, we saw the Eagle Park beer list get posted, and their collab with Untitled Art was a lemon meringue IPA.
Oh, sons of bitches.
And so we're like, ooh, can't do that. You can't have two lemon meringue beers coming out. Well, We Go Together was supposed to come out that weekend. It just fermented a little slower, and that's why the release was delayed. But I'm glad we decided to change it up because it gave us the opportunity to make the peanut butter and jelly beer, and it was a lot of fun. It was fun. We used a ton of nuts, and like I said, a lot of wheat, and just enough raspberry to give it that jelly-like characteristic, but it still tasted like a sandwich. It wasn't just a fruit beer. So it was a fun project, and we're actually, Mike was just in here on Saturday, and we're actually talking about brewing another variant of that down at his place, and we'll put it in cans. So that'll be pretty fun. The next couple months, we'll get that done.
Nice. Yeah, it's what I really liked about it is some people, when they talk about putting peanut butter into a beer, they go over the top, and the peanut butter just kind of takes over all the flavors. This one was really nicely balanced. The peanut butter wasn't too overwhelming. The jelly was coming through, and then, like I said, there's that nice bready quality at the back end.
Yeah.
That just kind of, I don't know, it really rounded it out into a nice sandwich form.
Yeah, I think the tartness and the wheat go together to kind of trick your mind into sourdough. And what's neat, like you mentioned, that the peanut butter does kind of disappear in the middle. You smell it, and it's what it smells like. But then the middle of the sip is more jelly, and then the finish is peanut butter and bread. So it was fun. It turned out great. Looking forward to making more peanut butter and jelly beers, sour beers, believe it or not. I never thought I'd be saying that, but we had a blast making it, and everyone seems to be really enjoying drinking it. So we're going to do a lot more of it.
Well, so for all of our Milwaukee listeners, get ready to take a trip to Chicago.
Yep.
And for all of our Illinois listeners, get ready for a fun beer near you.
Now, Kyle, we're hearing some things are afoot for 2019. Is it the year of the collab?
Absolutely. We've been doing so many that we decided to title it. We're somewhere, I'd have to look at my notes, but we're somewhere around 15 in so far this year. I do count Forbidden Roots collab, which came out in December, because that was kind of what kicked this all off. But, I mean, the list is too numerous. I'd hate to start to list it right now and then miss some people. It's been a lot of fun, and we have no signs of stopping. Proximity Malt has agreed to sponsor this program, so I'm actually... able, if I go to another state, they're shipping the malt out to us for free. I mean, we're paying for the malt, but they're covering the shipping and things like that. And so, really partnering with us and being incredible in that regard. So, it should be a lot of fun to see how it finishes up.
So, what drives collaborations between breweries? So, what does each brewery get out of the collaboration?
Well, that's actually something that at first was even hard for myself to wrap my head around. It was like, why do we do this? What is the point? But at the end of the day, it's a couple of things. The biggest driver of collaborations is the marketing aspect. I'm getting my brand in front of another brewery's customers and vice versa. And then the second part of it is learning. Like I'm going to a brewery and I'm, making a weird beer with them that we probably never made, or maybe it's something that's in their wheelhouse and I'm learning some techniques, and then vice versa. I'm teaching them something about maybe it's a different beer, or they had a question. For example, worked with Dangerous Man, and we brewed a raw IPA. Well, now here we are sitting talking about our first raw IPA. We kind of learned how to do conceptually this beer while we were with them, and then decided to take how that turned out and change a few things about it to create this one. So while it's technically our first raw IPA, I've already had the experience of doing it. And, we made the blue beer, and they hit me up, how'd you make that blue? We've got a Star Wars thing coming up. And sure enough, I told them how to do it, and they made a blue beer. So that to me is the most fun part. Like, yes, we get exposure, but the better part is going and hanging out with rad people and making beer and learning from one another. It's pretty cool.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're very honored that you've included us in your year of collaborations, and we're really excited to talk about this one. So I guess let's start with the name.
Sure.
So this has got a Norwegian yeast, is that right?
Yes. Yeah, Norwegian farmhouse yeast. These yeasts are old, very old, but they're new to the U.S. market. Some of the yeast companies are just starting to bring them in. It's spelled Kveik, which I'm sure between the four of us sitting here, we all have a different way we think it should be said. My understanding from a yeast guy is that it's like a W instead of a V, but then we listened to it on the internet earlier, and it
sounded like Tavik.
It sounded totally different. So I don't know if it's Queek or Kavik or Kveik. I mean, it's a Norwegian farmhouse yeast is what I like to say. But yeah, they're new to the market. There's a couple strains of them out, and this is our first time using one in-house.
This yeast is totally bonkers. Not only is it just a Norwegian farmhouse, it's got some really strange characters about it, Kyle. What are those?
First of all, you ferment it hot.
Like super hot.
Super hot. Like this one was, I think it maxed out at 96, 97 degrees. We've heard of some people getting up 98, 99 degrees, which is way hotter than I would ever expose any other of our yeast to. And what's cool about that is it doesn't create the barnyardy phenolic flavors that can be kicked off with other wild yeast at that high temperature. It's really, really clean.
I'll be honest, when Jim told me that, Jim's our home brewer, so he did most of the collaboration, most of the planning with you. But when he told me it was going to be a farmhouse yeast, I was like, I don't know, Jim. I'm not sure we want to do a Saison or something. But he's like, no. This
is an IPA.
This is not what you're expecting. I'm very pleasantly surprised. This has been a really fun process, and I think the final product speaks for itself.
It's neat. It's, at that high temperature, it really contributes all the fruity esters that you'd expect from a more restrained fermentation. You've got some of that citrus, some pineapple, some tropical fruits. Now, it's hard to tell what the yeast is responsible for and what the hops are responsible for, because those are all flavors that are present in the hops we used. And again, this is our first time. I don't have anything to compare it to. But either way, there's a lot of cool fruity flavors, and it goes fast. It ferments really fast. We dry hopped this beer after it had been in the tank for like 18 hours, which is insane. Some people are, Wild Mind from Minneapolis was just down here brewing with us. They brewed a beer with one of these strains, I don't know which one it was, on a Monday, dry hopped it on Tuesday, crashed it on Wednesday, and they were serving it at their tap room on a Friday.
Yeah, it can get real crazy. I think we'll be seeing more of this, because I think that might be the Voss strain that I know ferments really fast and quick. You're going to see it commercially, because who doesn't want to brew and serve a beer within a week, right?
It's incredible. It's a super turnaround.
Yeah, I mean, if you can cut a week or two off of your clean beers and still have bright, beautiful flavors, and your glycol system's not working as hard, I mean, all these things, I'm seeing a ton of it all of a sudden, all over the internet, all the threads I'm in and the brewing groups I'm involved with are trying it out. Even Third Space just did 2 of them.
Yeah, it is really taking over, and I knew when we wanted to brew this beer, it was like, we got to do it with Kyle, because Kyle's just crazy enough to do something.
Sure am.
And then we went and talked to Kyle. Kyle was like, you know what? That's a good idea. Let's crank it up to fucking 11.
Yeah, let's do this.
Let's go all the way with the Norwegian homage, doing no boil. That was great. You blew me away when you came out with that. I'm like, dude, what?
Yeah, I mean, typically that's how they would do these beers. They'd steep hops in a solution, make a hop tea, and then they would, slowly run it off and then just put it into their fermenters and add the hop tea back to it. And so it was a no-boil process, was the historical way to make. Now, they weren't putting nearly as many hops in as we did.
I can't think they did, no.
Yeah, well, no. We normally don't put this many hops in on the hot side. We went huge on this one in all aspects.
So what does not doing a boil add to the flavor profile that might have gotten taken away if you had done a boil with this?
For sure. I think the biggest, most noticeable thing, I don't know if you guys noticed, like, it's harder in my glass, but in the skinnier glass, it's just a light color.
Yeah.
Because without boiling it, we're not caramelizing any of those sugars at all. And so we don't have the Maillard reaction happening where we're darkening the solution. So it's very light in color, especially in a skinny glass. But then it doesn't change the grains in any way. Like, the sugar that we get out of it is exactly the sugar that the yeast went to town on. No heat being applied means that the chemical compound of those sugars didn't change at all. Where normally when you add heat, they change in a little way. They darken, they break apart, other things. So what I get, and the reason we use such a diverse list of grains, is torrefied wheat, oat malt, spelt, and golden promise, all just, bold flavored grains. But we did that because my fear with not boiling it was we were going to end up with it tasting really thin. It wasn't going to have this nice creamy body that I like in my IPAs. So we really layered in the different types of malts to add different types of proteins to this solution so that we still get this beautiful thick body to the finished product.
So speaking of the grain bill, that was kind of something that brings it back close to home for us. Was if you've listened to the podcast for a while, you know who Vince is. He does he does a lot of the video work. He does the theme song for our podcast. He and his band, the Gleasons. But Vince, once upon a time, had a wedding. He and his lovely bride Laura got married, and you were nice enough to provide a sixtel of one of your amazing beers for the event. I forget which one. It was definitely a hazy IPA. We loved it. But one of the really fun parts was Jim also did a homebrew for that day. Now, Vince was busy getting married, so he didn't actually get to try any. But this beer has actually got pretty much the same grain bill as the homebrew that Jim did. So that's kind of what we brought to the table. It's kind of what Jim brought to the table.
I didn't realize it was for the wedding. That's cool.
Yeah. No, it was really awesome because it was my first try. I've been done for a lot of research, and that's where Svelte came in. There's nothing like a under-modified German malt to put into get that nice protein haze, right? So
exactly.
And it was great to be able to come back to that, especially at the Golden Promise base, too. That was awesome. Be able to brew this for a wider audience. Maybe Vince will actually get to try it this time.
I hope so.
Or maybe
hoping,
not.
yeah.
There may be not a lot left.
After this interview.
So I think even the name, this Norwegian word that talks about the feeling of warmth and friendliness that arises from sharing simple pleasures of life with people you like. I mean, if that doesn't describe a wedding, I don't know what does. So it feels like it all kind of came full circle,
And for us, we were looking at this. It was a Norwegian beer. It's a collaboration done with friends. And, as brewers, that's kind of like that feeling of Koselig, or however you say it for us, is hanging out with friends. That's why I like collaborations. It's because I get together with other people that are like-minded, and we, do something that we're passionate about. And that kind of, it's not quite as like cozy feeling as, being in a sweater by a fire with hot chocolate, playing board games or whatever. But that's the feeling that I get when I brew beer with my friends. And so we thought it was really neat to tie that meaning in to this particular beer name, given that it was a collab with friends.
Yeah, and let's get into the third leg of this chair, which is the hops. And again, you cranked it up to 11, Kyle. the hops, not only are they a lot of hops, there's some pretty super cool hops in this that are going to add additional layers of complexity and flavor on top of this.
Right.
Of course, Citra, you can't do a good hazy without Citra. Our good old friend Nelson Sauvin. And then
the newbie, HBC 472. A lot of people probably are familiar with Sabro. It kind of went on a tear while it was available this year, which is a Neo-Mexicanus hop, which is a American soil born and bred wild hop that's genetically different than all the European varieties that we're used to seeing, which Citra is one of them. Nelson, I think, is of that family, even though it's a southern hemisphere hop. And so it's Neo-Mexicanus, and it's different. They were hard to grow. They were found growing in the desert. And now that they've figured out how to cultivate them and grow them to a level that's commercially viable, I'm loving it. I mean, they're so unique. It's this coconut and vanilla, and in this one, a little bit of oak, kind of like almost feels like tannin to it. It's a pretty cool hop.
Yeah, as this beer warms up, and normally you want to serve your beer on the cold side, but this, it opens as it warms up, and you start to get all these aromas and complexities in the smell and the taste, because you get those fruity esters from the yeast, and then the complexity of the HPC 472. It's really starting to come together.
It's layers of flavor that are deep, and that's what makes it kind of hard to describe. And that's what I get with all of these Norwegian farmhouse IPAs that I'm having, is they have this, like, especially the raw ones, they have this intensity of flavor, but it's like really pleasant, and I don't even know how to describe it. And then when you layer as many hops as we did, like I said, we went kind of silly on this one. It's just deep. As it warms, it changes, and they're all there, all the players. You know, the white grape and lychee from the Nelson, and all the citrus under the sun from the Citra, and then all the other neat flavors from the HPC. It was a fun combo. We didn't know. We've never used HPC 472 before. It was a newer hop to us, but we knew we loved Sabro, so we're like, let's go with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So new hops, new process, new boil temps. I mean, this was way out of the comfort zone. And I'm curious. So Jim and Kyle, you guys were an integral part of the entire brewing process. And I got to try this last week when it was still a little bit green.
Mm-hmm.
It's settled in nicely. Andy, you're trying this for the very first time. What are you getting out of this beer?
I mean, you guys are right. As it warms up, those complexities come out, and some of the things that were there when it was colder fall into the background. But I mean, it's so complex, you can't really. I'm getting the coconut and the vanilla on the back end. I actually did try it when it was only in the tank for 3 days, but it was super hot. You could still get some of those flavors coming out of it.
And it was weird because when you tried it, I mean, literally, it was hot. It was 80-something degrees at that time. It's really weird to drink beer at 80 degrees. That's not usually what you sign up for.
But, I mean, the grain profile you used, I mean, it's super soft, and it's got a creaminess to it that lends itself well to all the hop characteristics that are in the beer as well.
And like you said, a really beautiful, pale, golden color. I mean, it's like straight goldenrod coming out of this glass.
And if we hadn't put so many green hops into this, the color, I think, would look like a white, like a
Like
white.
a cream. I mean, I think
yeah.
it would really look like a glass of cream.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And you can kind of see that towards the top, especially when there's foam on it. You can kind of imagine, but. It is neat. Like you said, we pulled out all the stops. So we just got weird on this one and did everything different than we normally would. And it makes me just want to live my life that way.
Well, we can't wait to see what weird other collaborations you got coming out this year. Any that you can tell us about? Anything coming down the pike?
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of in this point right now where we're doing a lot of planning, but we don't have anything specific. I mean, except for obviously, Mike just this weekend was like, let's do peanut butter and jelly again. Other than that, we have some breweries in Duluth. We're going to go up to the Twin Cities again, trying to get out to Michigan, and we're working with some other people in Chicago, trying to write something up with Hop Butcher.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh my God, be still my little heart.
I was actually having, I woke up this morning having dreams about the recipe for that beer. And it was weird because it was nothing that would make sense to make with them. But that's what
It's even better.
My Twilight thought said I should. So, no, we've got a lot of really cool stuff in the works. We're going to have at least another 15 before the end of the year. In fact, I've got my marketing team designing a poster with everybody's logo on it. And so that way when we're done, we're going to send the posters out to everybody who participated. So,
that's cool.
Yeah, except you guys got to get me a round logo.
Yeah.
It's not going to fit the theme.
We'll get Jesus on it.
So this beer is actually kind of a Wonder Twin kind of a beer. So half of it went into just straight IPA. And then tell us about the second half of this beer.
So we got some new larger oak tanks. They're called puncheons. They're 500 liters. And we actually have dedicated one to this strain of new Norwegian yeast. So basically what we're going to do as often as we can is we're going to ferment in it. We're going to drain it, give it a quick rinse, fill it back up, and pitch more of the same yeast. Because this yeast is really hardy, and like I said, it's hundreds of years old. It's been passed down from family to family to family. So we're going to try to keep this one strain going in this oak tank. So half the beer same exact beer went into oak, and half went into stainless. The only difference is I'm trying not to dry hop in that oak tank because it's harder to clean. And I just didn't want old hops kind of getting stuck from beer to beer. So this one what we're going to do is actually transfer it out tomorrow, put it into a stainless steel tank with a bag of hops hanging in it, and then we will, crash it and package it off of that. So it's still going to be dry hop for about 5 days, but it's only going to get a single hopping. And I ran out of Nelson on the one we made with you guys, so the next one will not have any Nelson in it.
Yes.
That's okay.
That's what made this one extra special, is we used one of the most expensive hops that there are in this one. So
Yeah, there is nothing cheap on this. Other than I guess you didn't have to spend the money to boil a
right.
beer. that couple bucks
Saving on the energy cost.
That natural gas savings, it really adds up. No, but really, they'll think about this long term. If we did decide to make beer like this all the time, we're not boiling it, we're turning around quickly, so we're saving on utilities, and we're getting beer out to people quicker. It really does open up a lot of cool things for brewers, and that's why I think we're seeing a lot more of it.
So speaking of getting it out to people quicker, let's talk about this weekend. What does the release schedule look like for this beer?
Perfect. So as usual with us lately, at least this will be the way that we do it through August. We'll always release our beers on draft on Fridays when we open at 3 p.m. And then they will be available in bottles when we open at 11 a.m. And then we're also open on Sundays at noon. And so usually, it depends on the beer and how much we have of it, but usually the bottles last into Saturday. But again, it depends. Sometimes we have a huge line, and sometimes we don't. You never know. But yeah, that's the release schedules. It'll be out really, really soon here. This is a fresh pod.
And I would get here sooner rather than later for this one. I feel like this one, I know I'm going to buy a case. This one is too good to pass up.
Yeah, and just to put it in perspective, this is when I do anticipate selling out of on Saturday, only because of, we did split this batch to make 2 beers out of it, and so we don't have a ton of bottles, but we bottled 420 of them to be exact.
Nice.
Like
Circle back to Joint Fest.
But also, it is Memorial Day weekend.
Right.
People are going to be crushing some beers on the patio, and this one's very crushable. What's the alcohol content on this one?
It's 7.5.
Okay.
Yeah, which was interesting because we didn't boil it, so there was no evaporation or nearly no evaporation, and so therefore no concentration of sugars, and so we actually had to dump a lot of grain. So I guess all the savings we afforded ourselves on the natural gas was lost to all the extra grain we had to use, because normally you pick up, depending on the brew system, maybe it's 6, maybe it's a dozen gravity points during boil, especially depending on how long you boil that beer. And we didn't have any of that, so we knew we had to go high right into the kettle because we wouldn't pick that up. So it did take a couple extra bags of grain and everything, but we really wanted to be kind of in that mid 7 to 8 range, somewhere in there. And I really, because I don't know, I like to party.
If you're going to make a wedding beer.
Right.
Might as well make it strong.
Yeah, mazel tov.
Well, I think that's going to do it for us for now. Anything else you want to leave our listeners with about this beer, about your brewery?
Yeah, well, no, I guess the only thing is let's follow it up next week and come visit us for the second iteration, which is going to be called Norwegian Wood. Definitely a name that's been used a bunch of times, but hey, it's a small batch, so not too worried about it. But works well with the theme, and we're looking forward to being able to compare and contrast.
Nice. So come on down to 1840. We'll be around most of the weekend. We'll be here Friday and Saturday for both of those releases, and we can't wait to see you down here. Come by, say hi, tell us how good you think the beer is, or if you don't care for it, keep it to yourself.
Bring your podcast voice, yeah, and lie to me if you don't like it.
That's going to do it for us. For me, for Alex.
Andy here.
This is Jim.
Kyle signing off.
Thanks again, and this has been another solid non-fail production.